Welcome to the Unlist. Today we are talking about Alberto Morillas. This is my second Perfumer impression. My first one was about Francois Damasci, a man who I consider the ultimate DJ or remix artist of the perfume world, since the bulk of his career was spent as a GCMS, research and development. Okay, that's what he did at Chanel for a long time. Cherabo before that. Alberto Morillas has a little bit of a different story, though. Rather than being a controversial figure for being the person that reformulates all of your favorite fragrances or makes original fragrances that are really just retooling of other fragrances released by different brands under the same corporate umbrella, that is something I will leave to that video. You can go back and watch. Alberto Morillas has a bit of a different thing. He's not as controversial as Francois Damasci. He does have a lot of original successes under his belt where he was the first person to create that style. He wasn't copying anyone else's work. He wasn't doing anything that's derivative, and he certainly was not doing something that would leave a bad taste in someone's mouth by taking a favorite fragrance and changing it. Alberto Morillas has most of his fame from just putting out commercial hit after commercial hit after commercial hit. Alberto Morillas is still a bit controversial among the more snooty, pretentious, snobby types in the fragrance community. The kind of people that only wear Slumber House fragrances and only wear Original Door stuff and only collect deep vintage designers from the 70s and 80s. Those kind of people tend to have a chip on their shoulder about Alberto Morillas, but other than that, he doesn't really have much of a bad reputation. It's just the fact that he is kind of the fragrance equivalent to ABBA, okay, or Air Supply, all right, Toto, okay, so stuff like Dancing Queen, all right, I'm All Out of Love, okay, Africa, Rosanna, that's the kind of stuff Alberto Morillas has pumped out over and over and over again. And all of these commercial successes he's had over the years, going all the way back to the 70s. Yes, my friends, the 70s. He has had 50 years worth of these commercial successes. And he hasn't just made a couple. Like, perfumers like Pierre Bourdon have their few smash hits, right? They're one-hit wonders or two-hit wonders. Alberto Morillas has had again and again and again and again. You look at his track record, and it's ridiculous. You almost feel like he sold his soul to the Crossroads devil, right? Like he's the guy that went down to the Crossroads and said, I'll sell my soul for a magic guitar so I can make all the songs that everyone wants to hear. You feel like there's some kind of special circumstance surrounding this man, because for 50 years, his fragrances have been the ones that have quite literally shaped popular taste. Not just for women or just for men, for everyone. Whether he was the sole perfumer or a partner with another perfumer, his name is always attached to what are effectively the greatest hits. Now, I will say that his bigger hits didn't roll out until the 90s, 2000s, and 2010s. I will say that. The 70s and the 80s, he was a bit more obscure, a bit quieter. Okay, he had some things. Very early on, he had a very big hit, actually. His first commercial fragrance that he ever signed his name to is honestly one of the biggest ones he's ever done. So, I mean, yeah, even back in the day when he first got started, he had his name in lights, but he really didn't become the Alberto Morillas we know of him as being today until the 90s. So, what is it? What's with this guy? I mean, I think it's a combination of things. And then there's also just the sheer mathematics of it, okay? The fact that you have put out over 7,000 fragrances in your 50-year career thus far. Not 70, which would be still more than one a year. Not 700, which would be more than 10 a year. 7,000. How? How? That would almost imply that this man spends very little time on every fragrance he makes, since he's able to pump out 7,000. Well, like I said, the bit of controversy surrounding him, the only real bit of controversy surrounding him, is his adoption of technology and tools and processes to streamline his job. And that probably right there is the biggest piece of damning evidence, more than the fact that he has spent 50 years at the same company. I mean, you came in on the ground floor, my dude, in 1974, and it is now 2024, and you are the head perfumer of the entire company. So there's no real simple way of doing that, okay? So you just have to be the cash cow, de la cash cow, okay? That's the only way they're going to hand you the keys to the Lamborghini, to quote Michelangelo Badio, guitar player. You want the keys to the Lamborghini? Well, you got to work for them. And that's what he did. So, okay. Before I get into some of his fragrances, I'll tell you why I think he is able to make so many perfumes and also have so many commercial successes. And part of it has to do with the way he works. Okay, so the thing is, even before there was AI and all of these algorithmic machines that could take in all this consumer data, which you get from focus groups, you get from collecting it at point of sale, right? And spit out these magic accords that are a combination of all the things people voted on being their favorite smells, right? You feed a machine enough of this data and it comes up with these magic potions. Well, this combined with this combined with this is proven by our algorithm to be the highest potential of adoption across all human beings. So every human being on planet Earth, regardless of gender, religion, race, any of that stuff, they are most likely to enjoy these combination of smells because that's what the data comes back as. Even before he adopted that sort of thing, which, by the way, it's not really so much a him thing, that's a Firmenich thing. The whole company does that. But even before he had that kind of massive IBM, Deep Blue, Cthulhu, Skynet, Terminator thing to help him make fragrances, he just did a very simple thing. He did a very simple thing. And it's similar to what Francois Demachy does with gas chromatography. He just took all of the most popular fragrances on the market in a given year or given couple of years. He would analyze all of them, figure out what makes them tick, and then build building block accords. Not complete perfumes, but building block accords. Okay, so the thing that makes this popular, this combination of notes. So I will pre-make this like building block, and in the database it goes. This perfume over here, the thing that makes this tick is this, this, and this. So I will combine these together in a pre-made building block accord. Put that in a database. And we just do that for his whole career. In essence, building out a library of commercial successful accords. A library of things that could be built on top of, like a Boboli pizza shell, could be built on top of, like a slab of concrete that you put a house on, pre-made slab of concrete, right? You could build up any fragrance you want, and it would have a similarity to whatever's most popular. So you could build your own take of a Drakkar Noir. You could build your own take of a Poison. You could build your own take of an Eternity, okay, of an Issey Miyake, of anything. All the way up to the modern times of Invictus, of Aventus, of Baccarat Rouge 540. You can make your own take on these and still make it interesting and still make it different because you're not cloning the entire fragrance, guys. You're just taking the beating heart of it and surrounding that with new stuff, with different stuff, okay? It's not altogether different from the pre-made bases Firmenich used to have, and still sometimes, they still have a couple of them, but a lot of them are discontinued. But just like the Mousse de Saxe accord from Dallaire, right? All right, all the IFF bases. The IFF had all the famous IFF bases that Estee Lauder used to use, right, for all their fragrances. All right, Caron relied very heavily on the Delaire bases. Okay, so it's not altogether different from that. The only difference is a lot of these pre-made bases were made without commercial input. When Delaire made Mousse de Saxe, they didn't make it because they discovered another fragrance had Mousse de Saxe in it, so they wanted to have their own version of it. It wasn't like IFF decided to make whatever is underneath Chanel No. 5. That's the fundamental difference, is Alberto Morillas basically dissected a lot of popular fragrances and then made a cheat sheet. And then he also copies his own work repeatedly. So when he makes a successful fragrance, right, then someone else who comes along and says, hey, I really like that fragrance you made. I want something like that. And he goes, say no more, like a barber. Okay, you want this hairstyle? You want this haircut? Say no more. I will build you yours. I will give you your version of this other fragrance I've already done. And we see that. Even with not so commercially successful fragrances, right? Like, let me give you an example. Gucci Guilty Absolute Pour Homme from 2017. Not super successful. Not a real successful fragrance. Very unique. Arguably one of his more creative fragrances, which Alberto Morillas traditionally doesn't get to be creative in that way. He doesn't get to be artistic in that sense. So that was a rare treat for him. They actually took off the chains. They took off the shackles and let him play in the laboratory. He runs off and plays in the laboratory. And then he came back with this Gucci Guilty Absolute fragrance that went like that, commercial bomb. But there were people who liked it, and some of those people were clients wanting fragrances. So it gives them the opportunity to revisit that fragrance, okay? Look no further than Dark Lord by Kilian, Dark Lord. That is right there, an iteration of Gucci Guilty Absolute Pour Homme. Much more expensive, but there you have it. Then Philip Plein comes along and wants the No Limits fragrance. It's sweeter, it has raspberry notes in it, it builds up different, but underneath it all is the beating heart of Gucci Guilty Absolute Pour Homme. And then most recently, Zara. Zara released an oud range with Alberto Morillas as the perfumer on the bottles for every single one. And the elevated oud entry was basically the oud version of Gucci Guilty Absolute Pour Homme. It had all the Band-Aid notes, all the patchouli, all of that stuff, but at the very bottom, there's a medicinal oud note that's in there. So he has already played with his own formula 4 times. So one fragrance became 4 fragrances. Just that easy. So then you tell me, guys, how you get 7,000 perfumes in 50 years. You tell me. It's not difficult math, is it? Right? It's like with Acqua di Gio, Pour Homme. He wasn't the only perfumer on that fragrance, granted. He was one of 2. Okay? The other guy was Jacques Cavalier Belletrude, who actually should get credit for that fragrance, but a lot of times he doesn't. But the 2 of them helped develop the men's version of Acqua di Gio Pour Homme. And every flanker that has ever been, every single flanker that has ever been, has been Alberto Morillas. So we're talking Essenza, we're talking Profumo, we're talking Profumo Special Blend, we're talking Absolute, we're talking Absolute Instinct, we're talking Profondo, we're talking Profondo Lights, we're talking Eau de Parfum, we're talking Parfum, we're talking Profondo Parfum. All of them. All Alberto Morillas. Again, ask me how you get 7,000 fragrances. Very easy. You become a master of efficiency. You become a master of prefab. You prefab all the accords. You have all your formulas on file. You get big commercial successes that get people asking for you. You figure someone like Jeremy Fragrance is asking for you. There must be a reason for that, right? Because you've had things like Mousse de Cartier back in '75. He was only 1 year into his career, guys. 1 year into his career, and he already had Mousse de Cartier, the house launching fragrance for Cartier, Alberto Morillas. Boom. Instant recognition right there, guys. Alberto Morillas was more or less responsible for Cartier having a fragrance house. Not a whole lot in the 80s, okay, a couple of things, but then in the 90s, we get what? Aqua de Jo and Aqua de Jo Pour Homme. He was one half of both teams. So different perfumer on the women's version and on the men's version, but he was the other half on both. Okay. CK1 by Calvin Klein. Him and Harry Fremont, another Firmenich perfumer, by the way. Him and Harry Fremont, both CK1, another huge success. Train kept it rolling all night long into the 2000s, man. He had the signature Xenia fragrance. 94, he had Tommy by Tommy Hilfiger. Him and Anne Buzantian worked on that together. Alberto Morillas and Anne Buzantian, they both did Tommy Cologne in 94, okay? Same year as CK1, actually. So you figure after all that, very easy to see. And then a couple of quirky things along the way, right? Let's talk about some of the quirkier fragrances, the quirkier stuff, the stuff that Alberto Morillas is not typically credited with. And I have one of them with me today, actually, because I happen to be wearing it. So, coincidence, I promise you, if you believe that. But this is from 1978. This is his first men's fragrance. And it's called Homme de Café by Quirky, which nowadays Quirky is known as Coffin Lux. A lot of you are probably familiar with this bottle because this is one of those things that you see in all of the high street boutiques, all of the little mall kiosks, and it's always like $8, $9, $10, $15, extremely cheap, okay? So Quirky is a lower end perfume house. I don't want to make this video about them, but Quirky is basically like a Jock Bogart, right? They are like Lomani. They are like my previous video of Jean-Louis Vermeil or Vermeil. It's just that. It's another one of those not designer sort of brands, but they're also not drugstore. They're kind of somewhere in the middle, but they're a value-oriented brand. And Quirky, who would later become Coffin Lux, they also do licensed fragrances. So this particular perfume is under their Cafe Cafe range, which Cafe Cafe produces all coffee-themed fragrances, as weird as that is. And then Taxi and Watt, Salvador Dali, Andy Warhol, etc., etc. But this was his first men's fragrance, and it's supposed to smell like a coffee house. So think like Amen by Terry Mugler, but 18 years earlier, because 78 and 96, right? So it doesn't quite smell like a coffee shop. It doesn't quite smell like coffee, but if you squint, you close your eyes, and then get your face stuck like that. You imagine do that, you can kind of see it. It's mostly about oak moss and clove and cedarwood and nutmeg, and there's some Tonka-tone-ish kind of musk profiles in here because 70s, right? 78 was that time. Everything had to smell like brown, and the bottle's brown, so there you go. Everything had to smell like brown. But like I said, it does remind you a bit of a cafe, hence the name Homme de Café. And you look, it's got the nice little coffee beans on the cap there, and then there again they appear. But one of his earlier creations, pretty quirky stuff, right? Pretty quirky stuff. Cheap too. Just make sure if you're going to get this bottle, get the Quirky one. Don't get the Coffin Lux one, because I've smelled the newer bottles, and yeah, they're okay, but they're very thin. They don't have the richness that this has. But again, IFRA has a habit of doing that to our fragrances, right? So nothing you haven't already heard. So then we have Cybaris from 1988, another little known Alberto Morillas fragrance. I don't have the bottle on me. Really cool looking bottle though. Very very Art Deco, which had come back in style in the 80s. But Cybaris is probably one of the few animalic fragrances that you will ever smell from Alberto Morillas, aside from the Gucci, right? And it's a very sort of pissy, Uranus, citric opening, and then you have this nice sandalwood petitgrain thing, a little bit of amber in the base. So just think of like a Versace L'Homme, but less tobacco and more sandalwood and a little bit more animalic. It's very, very 80s, very, very powerhouse. It was a sales disaster, but Alberto Morillas did a good job with it. I mean, again, one of his quirkier things, you know. So there you guys have it, man. That is the man himself, the 7,000 perfumes, head of Firmenich. Now, lest I forget the AI thing, you know. He has, in recent years, admitted to embracing AI. And overall, that means now he has even less work to do. Before, he had his own building blocks. He had to make those building blocks. Now the AI can just go, here you go. Here's the thing that resembles what the client wants. Here's the thing based on our data that resembles the thing they want. So now he just kind of takes it and make some modifications, and then here you go. That's where Phantom came from, guys. He was one of the perfumers on that. Not the only one, but one of. And the original accord that the fragrance is built on, generated completely by AI. Now, he does have his own range, okay? There is a range of fragrances called milestones that started off as a candle shop that he had, because he's getting up there in years now, so he's trying to retire and do his own thing. He still works at Firmenich. He hasn't retired officially, but he has his little side gig. And him and his wife run this candle shop. They launched fragrances. And some of the milestones fragrances, people tell me, are very similar to his commercial work. Some of it is actually off the wall and weird. But my total assessment, my perfumer impression of Alberto Morillas, and I don't mean this as an insult, but he is very much a jobber. If you're familiar with professional wrestling, you know what a jobber is. Someone who comes out, does what they're told, whether it's to win or to lose. Most jobbers lose, though. They come out to lose. But whether it's win or lose, the jobber goes out there, does what the script tells them to do. They're not popular, they're not famous, they're not successful, they're not a heel or a face. They're just a jobber. They go out there, they tap out, whatever, then they come back. That's kind of what he reminds me of, man. He's just like the ultimate perfume jobber. He just does what he's told, and he's gotten so good, so incredibly efficient at doing what he's told. You know, you can ask for your version of Mont Blanc Legend, which is technically just a version of Abercrombie & Fitch Fierce, right? You can say, I want my version of whatever, but I want it to be a little bit sweeter. I want it to have a little extra lavender. I want a little more fruitiness to it. And he goes, okay, got you. Bing, bang, boom. Here's your fragrance. Spends like 5 minutes on it. So, you know, he's like, if you ever go to an Asian buffet, okay, and the guy that does the hibachi grill part, where you put the meats on the plate and you put the meat on the tray and he cooks it up for you real fast and gives it back to you, that's Alberto Morillas. Alberto Morillas is literally the country carver guy. He is the hibachi grill guy. You take the raw materials, you say, here's my food, he cooks it up for you in 10 minutes and hands it back to you, and then you've got a million-selling bottle of perfume. So he has some good stuff, some memorable stuff, but then he has 699 other 1,000 perfumes that aren't so memorable because they all smell more or less the same. That's my assessment, guys. Agree or disagree, tell me in the comment section below. I'll catch you later.